Hey guys, tonight we witnessed a betrayal so public, so cruel, it could have broken anyone. It was a Saturday night in November, cold in that coastal California kind of way where the breeze cuts, but the sky stays heartbreakingly clear. The wedding hall glowed with golden fairy lights. I stood near the back table holding a glass of flat champagne in one hand, my son Leo's fingers wrapped around the other. He was dressed in a tiny suit that still smelled faintly of starch and hope. I had pressed every pleat myself. From across the room, I could hear my mother's laugh sharp and layered in Chardonnay as she leaned in too close to Lana, my younger sister, the bride. Lana looked radiant, I won't lie. Her dress sparkled like it had swallowed 1,000 chandeliers. Her skin-glowed hair curled into soft waves. Flawless. I used to do her hair when we were kids. French braids before school, little things she never remembered. Leo tugged on my sleeve. Are we going soon? Soon, sweetheart, I whispered, smiling for him, not for myself. Then I heard it, the clinking of a glass, high-pitched and attention-seeking. Everyone turned. Lana was at the center of the room, microphone in hand, her posture effortlessly poised like a woman who's always known she was the favorite. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who made tonight magical, she began. My amazing husband, our parents, and of course my maid of honor, Rachel. I froze. Maid of honor, that title had never been mine. She hadn't even asked me to be a bridesmaid. People clapped automatically. I nodded, confused, a twitch in my smile. Lana continued, her voice syrupy sweet. Rachel is a single mom. She raised her son all by herself. Isn't that brave? There was a pause, my throat tightened, my pulse ticked up, so brave. To go through life without ever really being loved. A few nervous chuckles, I heard a fork drop. Someone whispered, "Did she just say that? She's still available, by the way." Lana added, winking. Anyone looking to adopt? More laughter, not from everyone, but enough to echo in my chest. Leo gripped my hand tighter. He was trembling. I could feel my ears ringing. I wanted to stand, to walk out, to scream, to vanish. Before I could move, another voice cut through the air, calm, measured male. "Excuse me?" Daniel the groom had stepped forward. He was no longer smiling. Lana turned, startled. "Babe, it was just a joke," Daniel raised a hand. "No, it wasn't." Silence dropped like a curtain. Tonight, he said, microphone in hand, was supposed to be the best night of my life. But it turns out the most important part of today isn't the vows or the cake. It's the truth. He looked at me, not with pity, but recognition. Rachel and I didn't meet for the first time last month. We met years ago in a hospital. My sister, Caroline, was dying of leukemia. Gasps. Shuffling, he went on. Rachel was the volunteer who sat by her bed every Friday. She brought her books, sang to her. When she couldn't sleep, made her laugh when no one else could. She brought her little boy, once a kid, who drew planets and stars and gave Caroline a reason to smile. Leo looked up at me, stunned. His mouth parted slightly. "I never forgot her," Daniel said, voice thick now. "And I never will. Because when my sister passed, the only person she mentioned in her final letter, other than family, was Rachel. She called her my lighthouse. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to disappear, and yet every part of me felt seen." Daniel turned toward Lana. "What I heard tonight wasn't humor. It was cruelty, and I won't be part of it." Lana tried to laugh it off. "Daniel, come on. I'm calling off this wedding," he said, firm. "And if you want to bill someone for the centerpieces, send it to my office." Someone gasped. A wine glass shattered. My mother stood in a blur, mouthing something I couldn't even process. Daniel walked toward me past a room full of frozen faces. He knelt beside Leo and said softly, "Thank you for the stars." Then he reached for my hand. "Come with me." And somehow, with my heart racing, my heels shaking, and my entire life flipping inside out, I stood. I took his hand. I took Leo's. And we walked past the chandeliers, past the laughter, past the cake I paid for, but never tasted. Outside, the air smelled like ocean and endings. Leo leaned into me and whispered, "Mom, are we in trouble?" I smiled for real this time. "No, baby. We're finally free." The morning after the wedding, or whatever that night had become, I sat on a quiet bench near Moonlight Beach, clutching a cup of coffee I didn't remember ordering. Leo was at my side, sketching quietly in his notebook, drawing waves and stars. He hadn't said much since last night. He didn't need to. His silence was soft, not wounded. Daniel sat across from me, his hands around a paper cup. Eyes a shade darker than yesterday. Neither of us had slept much, but his presence was steady like the tide. You remember everything, I finally said. He nodded. Almost everything. Some parts I'm still remembering. I stared at the sand, remembering a hospital room bathed in pale blue light, the IV beeping steadily, a girl named Caroline, barely 23, with no hair under her headscarf and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. I wasn't supposed to volunteer on her floor, I said, but someone called in sick and I was already there helping with holiday cards. She smiled at me like I wasn't just a stranger, so I stayed. Daniel looked down. She talked about you, a lot. She said you reminded her what it meant to be alive, even when everything else felt like dying. I blinked hard. Her drawings, I whispered. She used to sketch lighthouses, said she wanted to live in one. She did. Daniel smiled faintly. She said it was the only place where you could see the dark and still offer light. A breeze picked up. I gripped my cup tighter. She was the first person who ever made me feel like just being me was enough, I said. Not the divorced daughter, not the single mom, just Rachel. Daniel nodded. And she wasn't the only one you changed. I looked up. He shifted in his seat, voice quieter now. After she died, I couldn't breathe for months. Lana was easy, loud, distracting. I thought maybe if I moved fast enough, smiled wide enough, I could outrun grief. I tilted my head. Did it work? He gave a bitter laugh. No, it just muted me. We sat in silence, just the waves and Leo humming quietly beside me, his pencil still moving. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in soft blue cloth. He placed it on the table between us. I was going to give this to Lana, he said, but now I think it belongs somewhere else. I unwrapped it slowly. My breath caught. It was a ring, not new, vintage, a slender band of silver holding a deep green emerald that shimmered even under the cloudy light. This was Caroline's, he said. She gave it to me before and told me, when you find someone who reminds you how to breathe again, give her this. My throat burned. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He leaned forward, eyes steady. I don't expect anything. No pressure, no decisions, just, I want you to know this. Last night wasn't impulsive. It was overdue. I stared at the ring, at the weight of it, at what it meant, and all I could think was how strange it is that sometimes the people who see us best are the ones we didn't even know were watching. Rachel Daniel said softly, "You're not invisible. You never were." I wiped my cheek with the sleeve of my sweater, embarrassed, but he didn't look away. Then Leo looked up, eyes bright behind his sketchbook. "Mom, yes. Baby, can I draw the lighthouse again?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think you should." And as he bent over the page, drawing beams of light reaching through the fog, I realized something. I didn't just walk out of a wedding last night. I walked out of a lie. You never really notice the absence of love until someone points it out to you gently or cruelly. In my case, it was usually cruel, sometimes in words, but more often in silence. That's how it was growing up in the Moreno house, a silence that wasn't quiet. It was loaded. Mom Sylvia was the type who believed in appearances over affection. Every room in that house was picture perfect, but if you stayed too long, you'd feel the cold under the candles, the kind of cold that clung to the air, even during warm California winters. I moved out when I was 22 after a brief marriage to Leo's father that ended in apologies, court filings, and a series of quiet breakdowns in the shower. When the divorce finalized, I moved back home for 6 months with my newborn. I remember thinking maybe she'll see me differently now. Maybe being a mother will earn me a place at the table. But I was wrong. Again, she never called Leo by name, just the baby. Never offered to hold him unless someone else was in the room. Never acknowledged that I was up every night nursing him through colic and fever and teething. Instead, she reminded me daily that I was now damaged goods and that Lana, 4 years younger and still in college, was the family's future. I saved every dollar I could, working remote accounting jobs at night while holding Leo during the day. I moved out quietly one morning, left a thank you note on the kitchen counter, and never looked back. Not really. But distance doesn't always bring peace. When the pandemic hit, and Mom's house needed repairs, roof leaks, electrical rewiring, you name it, she called me, not Lana. Because Rachel knew numbers and was practical. I paid for half the costs up front, covering invoices under my own name. She promised to put my name on the deed, eventually said it was just a formality. Of course, that formality never happened. Months later, I walked in to drop off Leo for an hour while I went to a client meeting. On the wall next to the stairs hung the new family portrait, a glossy canvas print. Everyone was there: Mom, Lana, Uncle Gabe, even Daniel, but not me. I wasn't cropped out. I was never included. Leo saw it before I did. He looked up and asked, "Where are we, Mom?" And I had to tell him something that didn't sound like betrayal. Sometimes cameras miss the best people, I said, kneeling to fix his jacket zipper. He looked at me like he wanted to believe it. So I tried to believe it too. The week before Lana's wedding, I was at that same house fixing seating charts, calling caterers, juggling details like I was part of the team. I wasn't. Mama turned Lana's old bedroom into a bridal suite. Lana herself was too busy with dress fit-ins and Instagram stories to notice that I hadn't even been given a seat at the rehearsal dinner. "You're not coming, are you?" Mom asked, pouring herself a glass of wine one evening. To the dinner, I wasn't invited. She shrugged. "Well, we don't want you to feel out of place. It's mostly for couples." I stared at her. "You mean because I don't have a husband?" She sipped and said nothing. I should have walked out then, but I didn't, because I thought if I stayed, maybe I could shield Leo from the same kind of emptiness I was raised in. Maybe if I smiled through it, he wouldn't see the cracks. But he saw them. Kids always do. One night he crawled into bed next to me at our little apartment and whispered, "Why does Grandma only talk to Lana?" I didn't have an answer, so I told him the only truth I could. Sometimes people only see what they want to see. He thought about that for a while, then said, "I see you." And it nearly undid me. It still does, because when your own mother overlooks you, erases you from pictures and place settings and small family jokes, you begin to wonder if maybe you really are forgettable, replaceable, too much and never enough. That's the lie I carried into that wedding. That's the weight I wore instead of a bridesmaid dress. And still I showed up, because Leo deserved to see me try. The DA. Even if no one else noticed I was there. Why, I saw Lana's wedding dress. For the first time, it wasn't on her. It was on a mannequin, one of those glossy, armless torsos in Mom's sunroom where she'd set up a kind of bridal altar surrounded by candles and fake eucalyptus. The dress was everything Lana loved: dramatic, embroidered, expensive. Layers of satin, delicate lace, a train that puddled across the tile like spilled cream. I stood there in my worn jeans, holding a clipboard running through the last set of RSVPs. My task, of course, not hers. Mom walked in behind me carrying a plate of imported macarons. "Isn't it stunning?" I nodded. "It's beautiful. It's Oscar de la Renta." Of course it was. She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You're not wearing navy, are you?" "For the wedding, I have a soft blue dress I was planning to wear." She clicked her tongue. "Rachel, please, not satin. You'll shine too much in the photos. It's Lana's day." I wanted to ask, "Do you think I sparkle so easily?" But instead I said, "It's matte cotton. No shine." She nodded as if that settled it, as if my body was a problem to be solved. Then she left me there standing next to the mannequin, both of us featureless and quiet. That afternoon, while Lana was out getting her nails done and Mom was on her fourth call with the florist, I slipped upstairs to the guest room. I needed 5 minutes alone. I sat on the edge of the bed where I used to sleep when I was younger, before Leo, before the divorce, before the labels. The room smelled the same lavender and lemon furniture polish, but the bookshelf had been emptied, my old drawings gone. The photo of Dad and me on the windowsill vanished. In their place was a frame shot of Lana and Daniel at a winery. Perfect smiles, matching sweaters, a future built on curated moments. My chest tightened. I reached into my purse and pulled out the vendor receipts, a stack of them. Over $4,200 in expenses I'd covered quietly, assuming someone would pay me back. Spoiler, no one did. From the custom calligraphy for the menus to the emergency backup generator for the tented ceremony, my name wasn't just on the bills, it was written in invisible ink across every single detail of that wedding. And yet, I was still the outsider. 3 days before the ceremony, we had a final family meeting at Mom's place to finalize logistics. I was seated at the end of the dining table, scribbling notes while Lana lounged in activewear scrolling Instagram. Daniel hadn't arrived yet. Mom poured wine and said, "Rachel, can you pick up the flower arrangements from La Jolla Saturday morning?" I hesitated. "That's the morning of the wedding." She looked annoyed. "You'll have plenty of time to change. Just don't be late." Lana chimed in without looking up. "Just make sure your dress doesn't wrinkle in the car." It was like being a concierge in a family I was born into. I wanted to scream, "I paid for the car, for the flowers, for your perfect life, and your Pinterest wedding board," but I didn't. I folded the to-do list and tucked it in my planner, because that's what I always did, tuck myself away neat and small. Later that evening, while picking up Leo from Mom's, I noticed he was quiet, too quiet. On the drive home, he finally spoke. "Is it okay that I'm not in the wedding? What do you mean?" "No one asked me to do anything," he said, "not even bring the rings. I thought maybe, since I'm part of the family." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You are baby. You are the best part of this family." He looked out the window. "Then why does it feel like we're not invited?" I couldn't answer. Instead, I reached over and placed my hand on his small, warm knee, because I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break both our hearts. That night, I stared at the ceiling above my bed, thinking of Caroline, of the way she once said, "The worst kind of loneliness is the one where people forget you exist while you're standing right in front of them." She was right, and I had never felt more visible in my pain or invisible in their lives. That wedding wasn't just Lana's fairy tale, it was my erasure sewn into satin and served on crystal plates. 2 nights before the wedding, I got an email from the venue confirming the guest count and meal selections. I opened the PDF like I always do, scanning for any errors, double checking spellings, verifying vendor arrival times. That kind of detail was second nature to me. It was comforting, predictable. But what wasn't predictable was what I didn't see: my name, not on the guest list, not under maid of honor, not even marked +1 with Leo. Nothing. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a system glitch. I zoomed in, searched, scanned. Nothing. And then I saw it. Under family table, Sylvia Moreno, Lana Carter, Gabe Moreno, Daniel Carter, Vivian Carter, his aunt, and 2 names I didn't even recognize. No Rachel, no Leo. My lungs tightened. I sat frozen in my chair, the cursor blinking on the screen like it was mocking me. I called Mom. "Hello," she answered, voice crisp. "I just checked the guest list," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Leo and I aren't on it." A pause. "Then, Rachel, we didn't think you'd mind. You're already helping with logistics. You'll be there early anyway. But I wasn't listed for a seat. For a meal, for anything. You can sit with the kids if you want," she said briskly. "Table 9. I let that sink in. "You want me to sit with the children?" "Well, you're bringing your child, aren't you?" I wanted to scream, not for me, for Leo. Because he would notice. Kids always do. And he deserved more than a paper napkin and a plastic cup of lemonade at the edge of someone else's party. I hung up. I didn't even wait for her to finish the next sentence. That night, I packed Leo's suit, my pale blue dress, and the emergency sewing kit I'd carried to every family event for 10 years. I don't know why. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope that somehow, despite it all, someone would remember I existed. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue early, of course I did. Leo and I entered through the back loading zone because the front entrance was reserved for formal arrivals. I carried centerpieces to the main hall, pinned place cards, fixed a lopsided arch with safety pins. Lana floated past once already in hair and makeup, sipping an iced latte, never making eye contact. At one point, a young server stopped me. "Ma'am, where should I place these?" I blinked. "I'm not with the venue staff." "Oh," he blushed. "Sorry, you just seem in charge." Funny how I was always responsible but never important. Just before the ceremony, I ducked into the bridal lounge to check on Leo. He was sitting in a corner chair swinging his polished shoes. His little bow tie was crooked. I bent down to fix it. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then hesitated. "Why don't we have seats?" I paused. "We do, just not at the main table because we're not real family." His words sliced deeper than any grown-up insult. I forced a smile. "We are real, just not always seen." He looked away. "That's the thing about Leo. He doesn't cry easily. He absorbs pain like cloth absorbs wine, slow and irreversible." Before I left the room, he pulled something from his backpack, a drawing. It was of me holding a lantern. Behind me was a cliff, dark and steep. Ahead of me, stars, and beside me, him. "This is us," he said quietly. "You always find the light." I kissed the top of his head and slipped the drawing into my purse. When the music started, when Lana walked down the aisle on Mom's arm, because Dad had passed long ago and no one ever asked if I wanted to say something in his place, I stood in the shadows, bouquet in hand, steady and invisible. Every pair of eyes followed her in her white miracle of a gown. And no one saw me, not even when I stepped behind her to fluff the train, not even when I caught her veil before it blew off in the breeze. That's when I understood. I wasn't written out of the story. I was being used to hold it together so that they could look perfect, but perfection is fragile. And sometimes the one who holds the glue is the one they should have feared all along. Weddings have a way of pretending that everything is beautiful, that no one's hurting, that love is enough to gloss over the cracks. But cracks don't vanish, they wait. The reception hall was drenched in gold warm lights reflecting off glassware people, laughing too loudly, waiters gliding between tables like dancers in someone else's fairy tale. I stood near the edge of the room bouquet, long since dropped the blue of my dress dull under the chandeliers. Leo sat quietly beside me, his little fork pushing a piece of grilled chicken across the plate. No one had spoken to him since the ceremony, no one except Daniel earlier during photos when he'd leaned in and said, "Nice shoes, little man." That had made Leo smile. The microphone squeaked. Lana, glowing and triumphant, stood at the center of the floor. Her white gown shimmered like it had swallowed every bit of spotlight. Daniel stood a few feet behind her, hands clasped jaw tight. "I just want to say a few words," Lana beamed. "First, thank you all for being here to celebrate this magical day with us. I've never felt so surrounded by love." The crowd clapped, forks clinked, glasses were raised. And of course, she continued, "I want to thank my amazing family, my mother, my new in-laws, my darling bridesmaids, and someone very special who has always been in the background." I felt a prick at the base of my spine. She turned toward me. "Rachel," heads turned. "You've always been there, haven't you, fixing things, handling messes, quiet, dependable, selfless Rachel." A few polite chuckles. "You raised a child all on your own," she said, her voice dripping with sugar. "Isn't that brave?" I swallowed. Leo looked up at me, his eyes wide cautious. "So brave." Lana continued to go through life without ever being truly loved. The room went still, then a few uncomfortable laughs from people too polite to know what else to do. "And she's still available, folks," Lana added with a smirk. "Anyone looking to adopt laughter now? Real, stinging, careless laughter." I felt Leo's hand slide into mine. He was shaking. "Just kidding." Lana waved her hand playfully. "We love you, sis." Before I could move, before I could even blink away the heat behind my eyes, Mom stood up, Sylvia in her gold shawl and practice poise, holding a champagne flute like a queen. "Our Rachel has always been, well, the quiet one," she said with a laugh. "Reliable, a little dull perhaps, but secondhand goods still have value, especially with a built-in child." The laughter grew louder. Something broke. Not in me that had happened years ago. It broke in the air. In Leo. In the way Daniel suddenly stepped forward. He walked to the microphone. Lana blinked. "Daniel, what?" He took the mic gently from her hand, his other hand clenched at his side. "Excuse me," he said, voice even, but cold. "I need to say something." The room stilled again, all forks down, all breaths held. Tonight, Daniel said, was supposed to be about love, but instead I've heard cruelty disguised as humor, and I can't stand here and pretend I didn't hear it. He turned toward the crowd. "Rachel and I didn't meet last month like you think. We met years ago in a hospital. My sister Caroline was dying." Gasps, murmurs. A wineglass was gently set down somewhere in the silence. Rachel was a volunteer. She sat with Caroline when no one else would. She brought her books, sang to her, held her hand when she was too weak to speak. And one day she brought her son Leo. He looked down at my son. Caroline called him her sunshine. She taped his drawings next to her bed. She said Rachel reminded her of life even when hers was slipping away. I stood frozen, the world spinning around me. Leo gripped my arm tighter. Daniel's voice hardened. "And tonight, the way you've spoken to this woman, your own sister, your daughter, is disgusting." Lana's face paled. "Daniel, I'm calling off this wedding." Silence dropped like thunder. No, Sylvia stood trembling. Daniel, don't be ridiculous. We've paid for everything. I'll cover every cost, he said. Every plate, every flower, every insult you thought you could slide under a joke. He walked over to Leo, bent down. Thank you for your light, he said. Don't ever dim it for anyone. Then he turned to me and extended his hand. Come with me. I didn't move for a full heartbeat. Then my body did what my heart had wanted to do for years. I stood, Leo stood with me, and together we walked out. No one called my name, no one apologized, except for Lana. She screamed Daniel's name, mascara streaking down her cheeks, panic splashing across her perfect day like wine across silk. Mom followed her flustered, still trying to salvage the performance, but we didn't look back. Outside, the night was cool. The ocean air tasted like truth. Leo exhaled beside me. That was scary. Yeah, I said, but we're safe now. And maybe for the first time in years, I actually meant it. The drive away from the venue was quiet. Not silent, but the kind of quiet where you feel your heart beat louder than usual, where every red light feels like a moment to breathe instead of a delay. Leo sat in the back seat, still in his suit, his clip-on tie askew, clutching his sketchbook like a life raft. I glanced at him through the rearview mirror, and he gave me a soft smile, the kind that tries to be brave, even when the world just turned upside down. Daniel followed in his car. He had offered to drive us somewhere peaceful away from the stairs and gasps and unpaid invoices. I didn't ask where, I just nodded when he said, "Trust me." 25 minutes later, we were seated at a small seaside restaurant tucked between bluffs and Encinitas. No fancy sign, just warm yellow light spilling from the windows and a wraparound porch overlooking the Pacific. We sat at a table on the terrace. The sea was dark and endless, the kind of black that only knows how to whisper. Inside, a waiter in rolled sleeves served us water with lemon, and Leo leaned over the wooden edge of the table, watching the waves roll toward nothing. No one said much. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. I stared out at the horizon and said mostly to myself, I thought I could take it. One more night. One more room of people pretending I didn't exist. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. I turned to him, but Leo saw it. He looked at my son now sketching stars in the corner of his notebook. That's what made me walk. I studied him in the dim light, trying to see the man behind the sudden public defiance. He wasn't smug, he wasn't posturing. He looked relieved. He reached into his coat again, slower this time, and pulled out the soft blue cloth I recognized from earlier that week. Without ceremony, he placed it on the table. I meant to give this to you in private, he said. Now feels right. I unfolded it again. Caroline's ring, emerald green vintage, gentle in its age. There was something humble about it, the kind of jewel that didn't scream but waited to be chosen. She told me Daniel said to give it to the woman who reminded me of the good parts of her, the strong parts, the honest parts. I looked down at the ring. My hand shook slightly. I'm not ready. I know, he said. I'm not asking. I'm giving. I met his eyes. You deserve to hold something that wasn't borrowed. That wasn't conditional. That was truly yours. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a promise. It was something better. A truth. After we ate well, pretended to eat, Leo stood and handed Daniel a new drawing. It was of a lighthouse, strong, tall, and at the top a soft emerald glow. Daniel turned the paper gently. Is this for Caroline? Leo nodded. I drew it from memory. She would have loved it, Daniel said, voice low. Leo leaned against my arm. Mom always finds the light. The next morning, we drove down to the cemetery where Caroline was buried, a quiet corner beneath eucalyptus trees. The sun filtered through their tall, swinging arms like blessing hands. I had never been here before, but somehow it felt like I already had, like I'd been carrying this place inside me for years. Daniel brought white lilies. Leo brought a stone he had painted the night before, a smiling sun and a cluster of stars. He knelt, placed the stone beside the flowers, and whispered, Thank you for being kind to my mom. Daniel's breath caught. I touched his arm. She sees him, I said. Even now. He nodded. We stood in silence, no apologies, no rehashing, just the rustle of leaves and the feeling that something sacred had finally been seen. Later that day, back in our apartment, Leo curled up on the couch with a bowl of cereal as if the past 24 hours hadn't fractured the family tree. He seemed lighter, like someone had untied a knot from around his chest. Daniel stayed for a while, helped me fold laundry, made tea without asking. He didn't try to define anything. He just showed up, consistently, quietly. That night before bed, I opened the drawer next to my bed and placed the ring inside, not to hide it, but to keep it safe. Because for the first time in years, I was choosing not just what to hold on to, but what not to carry anymore. 1 year later, the leaves had turned and fallen again, and California's version of winter had crept in misty mornings, quiet afternoons, and golden light that lingered like forgiveness. I stood outside a small brick building tucked between a florist and a consignment bookstore on a sleepy street in North Park, San Diego. The sign above the door read Moreno Accounting and Co. I had hung it myself, leveled it 3 times, stepped back, breathed it in. Not just a business, a reclamation. Inside the office was modest, a gray sofa, a few succulents that Leo insisted we name. My desk, still the same one from my home office days now, stood beside a corkboard covered in receipts, notes, and Leo's drawings, one of a lighthouse, one of Caroline's ring, and one of me holding a clipboard and a coffee mug smiling. I'd gotten used to smiling again. The local paper had written a short piece about the launch. A couple of former clients followed me here, and word of mouth did the rest. It turns out people still appreciate someone who remembers the little things, like decimal places and the birthdays of their kids. Leo, now 12 and suddenly taller than me when he stands on tiptoe, came bursting in one afternoon with his soccer cleats in one hand and a peanut butter sandwich in the other. Coach made me captain, he grinned, crumbs trailing his sentence. I looked up from the invoice I was typing and smiled. Captain Moreno has a nice ring to it. He plopped down on the sofa and pointed to the photo on my desk, me and him, standing in front of the courthouse on the day I finalized the paperwork to become sole owner of my childhood home. I had never moved back in, but taking it back had been necessary, not out of revenge, out of closure. Do you ever miss them? He asked once out of nowhere. It took me a moment to realize who he meant. No, sometimes I said, but missing isn't the same as wanting to return. He nodded like he understood too well for his age. Then he added, I don't miss how they made you small. That stayed with me. Sylvia, my mother, had called me 3 times since the wedding, left voicemails with words like misunderstood and I never meant to hurt you, and family is still family. Each message sounded less like remorse and more like reruns of an old show I no longer subscribed to. Show. I never called back. Lana, I heard. Tried to spin the wedding debacle as a misunderstanding gone viral. She moved to Los Angeles, chased new deals, tried to keep her followers from unfollowing. But something about that moment, the mic, the silence, the walkout, never left her reputation unscathed. The irony was that the woman who always wanted to be center stage was now remembered most for the night someone else quietly took the spotlight. And I hadn't even asked for it. That Christmas Eve, the apartment glowed with soft light heats. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen. Leo had fallen asleep on the couch with a book open on his chest and a cat curled at his feet. I sat on the floor by the tree, sorting gifts into uneven piles. Daniel's scarf, Leo's new sketch said a card I'd written for myself, and tucked in an envelope that read, To the woman who stayed even when no one clapped. Daniel arrived just before midnight. Snow, rare and fleeting, had started to fall outside, powdering his shoulders as he stepped in. He carried a box wrapped in linen ribbon. This time he said softly, No spotlight, no microphone, just me. I opened the box slowly. Inside was Caroline's ring. Again. I looked at him surprised. You gave me this already. He smiled. No, I lent it. This time I'm asking. He knelt not with flair, not with pressure, just a man who had seen the worst of me and still stood there, hands open. Will you build a life with me? He asked. Not perfect, but honest. I looked around at the drawings on the wall, the couch where Leo snored gently, the cup of cocoa that had gone cold beside me, and then I said yes, not because I needed saving, but because I had already saved myself. The next morning I woke before everyone else, stepped outside with a blanket around my shoulders and a cup of hot tea in my hands. The street was still, the world was slow. A single beam of sun broke through the clouds. I stood there, toes freezing on the concrete, and whispered, Thank you. To Caroline, to the version of me who stayed silent for too long, to the light I found without anyone handing it to me. Because in the silence they left behind, I didn't just rebuild, I rose. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden in the shattered centerpieces and broken vows, that strength doesn't always arrive with volume. Sometimes it comes in the form of a steady hand, a child's quiet drawing, or a woman who chooses to rise rather than retaliate. As Maya Angelou once said, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Rachel didn't burn the house down. She built a new one with her name on the door and love that didn't require permission. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to reclaim your voice after being silenced? Your story matters too. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories 94. Every subscription is a quiet hand on my back, helping me bring more powerful stories like this to life. This wasn't just a video, it was a reckoning. See you in the next one.